Imagine standing on the edge of something so vast and so powerful that every civilization in human history has been shaped by it. Not a mountain, not a desert, an ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. Most people think they know the Atlantic. They've seen it from a beach. They've flown over it. But what almost everyone believes about this ocean is just the surface, literally. The Atlantic covers 106 million square kilometers. That's more than the combined landmass of every continent on Earth. Every city, every war, every civilization, all of it would fit inside the Atlantic with room to spare. But size alone doesn't tell the story. We have mapped the surface of Mars with greater precision than we have mapped the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. We know more about craters on the Moon than about the valleys sitting right here on our own planet, hidden beneath these dark waters. Those underwater mountains? The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is the longest mountain range on Earth, longer than the Andes, longer than the Himalayas, stretching 16,000 kilometers, and almost nobody knows it exists because it sits 2 kilometers underwater. This mountain range is also one of the most geologically active places on the planet. Every single year, the Atlantic Ocean gets 2.5 centimeters wider. Over millions of years, this is the force that separated Europe from America and created the ocean we see today. 180 million years ago, there was no Atlantic Ocean. There was one supercontinent, Pangaea. Then the Earth cracked, the plates shifted, and the Atlantic was born. This geological activity has consequences. In 1755, an underwater earthquake in the Atlantic triggered a tsunami that destroyed Lisbon, killing up to 100,000 people in a single morning. But the greatest danger isn't earthquakes, it's the Atlantic's currents. The AMOC, Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, functions like a giant conveyor belt moving warm water toward Europe. This current is the reason London is warmer than Moscow. It's the reason Western Europe is habitable at all. Right now, that current is slowing down. Scientists have measured a 15% weakening since the mid-20th century. If it collapses, the consequences would be catastrophic. Europe would face temperatures not seen since the last ice age. The Atlantic Ocean is not just a body of water. It is a machine, a climate machine, a geological machine, running continuously for 180 million years. And it has always been completely indifferent to the tiny creatures living on its shores. This is the story of that ocean. And it starts with a mystery so old, it predates recorded history itself. Every civilization that has ever lived near the Atlantic Ocean has told the same story. A great land, a powerful people. And then, the ocean swallowed them whole. We call it Atlantis. And for 2,400 years, humanity has been arguing about whether it was real. The story comes from one man, the Greek philosopher Plato. In 360 BC, he wrote about a magnificent island civilization that existed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we today call the Strait of Gibraltar, the entrance to the Atlantic Ocean. According to Plato, Atlantis was not just an island. It was an empire, a civilization so advanced that it dominated the Mediterranean world for generations. They had architecture that no other culture could match. They had military power that made entire kingdoms surrender without a fight. And they had something else, a knowledge of the ocean that allowed them to sail places no other civilization dared to go. And then, in a single day and night, Atlantis was gone, swallowed by the Atlantic Ocean. Vanished so completely that within a generation, people were already debating whether it had ever existed at all. For centuries, historians dismissed Plato's story as pure fiction, a philosophical thought experiment, a moral tale about the dangers of pride and greed, nothing more. But then, something unexpected happened. Scientists started finding things on the Atlantic Ocean floor that had no business being there. Off the coast of the Azores, a chain of islands sitting almost exactly where Plato described Atlantis, researchers discovered underwater rock formations that appear to be man-made, perfectly geometric stone structures sitting hundreds of meters below the current ocean surface. Near the Bahamas, divers discovered the Bimini Road, a half-mile-long formation of perfectly flat rectangular limestone blocks arranged in a precise formation on the ocean floor. Geologists argue it's natural, but the geometry is difficult to explain. And in 2011, a team of researchers using satellite imagery discovered an enormous buried structure beneath the mudflats of southern Spain, in a region that was underwater thousands of years ago. The structure showed concentric rings of land and water, matching Plato's description of Atlantis almost exactly. None of this proves Atlantis existed, but it raises a question that scientists are increasingly uncomfortable with. What if the ocean has been hiding something from us all along? The Atlantic is 180 million years old. Human civilization is only 10,000 years old. That means, for the vast majority of human history, sea levels were dramatically lower than they are today. Entire coastlines, entire regions where people lived, are now underwater. Whatever Atlantis was, myth, memory, or reality, the Atlantic Ocean has already swallowed worlds we will never recover. There is a region in the Atlantic Ocean where, according to popular belief, ships vanish without a trace, planes fall from the sky, and compasses spin uselessly in circles. A place so dangerous that experienced sailors refuse to cross it. A place that has swallowed hundreds of vessels and thousands of lives without leaving a single piece of evidence behind. The Bermuda Triangle, the most famous mystery in the history of the ocean. The triangle connects 3 points: Miami in Florida, the island of Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. The area covers roughly 500,000 square kilometers of the Atlantic Ocean, and for decades, it has been the subject of books, documentaries, and theories, ranging from the plausible to the absolutely insane. People have blamed the disappearances on everything: alien abductions, underwater alien bases, portals to other dimensions, methane gas explosions from the ocean floor, rogue waves, magnetic anomalies, the lost technology of Atlantis pulling ships beneath the surface. But here is what the data actually shows. Lloyd's of London, the world's most experienced insurance market, which has been tracking maritime disasters for over 300 years, does not charge higher insurance rates for ships crossing the Bermuda Triangle, because statistically, it is not more dangerous than any other part of the Atlantic Ocean. The United States Coast Guard officially does not recognize the Bermuda Triangle as a hazardous area. The number of disappearances in the region, when adjusted for the volume of traffic passing through it, is completely normal. So what happened to all those missing ships and planes? The answer is mundane but fascinating. The Bermuda Triangle sits at the intersection of some of the most extreme weather on the planet. Sudden violent storms can develop in minutes with no warning. The Gulf Stream, one of the most powerful ocean currents on Earth, runs directly through the triangle, capable of moving debris thousands of kilometers away from where a vessel sank. The ocean in this region reaches depths of 9,000 meters in places, meaning wreckage simply disappears into the abyss. And here is the detail that changes everything. Many of the most famous Bermuda Triangle disappearances were either heavily exaggerated, misreported, or happened nowhere near the triangle at all. The legend was largely created by a single writer, Charles Berlitz, whose 1974 book sold millions of copies and invented details that never existed in the original incident reports. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Even without the mythology, even with all the exaggerations stripped away, the Atlantic Ocean in this region is genuinely, provably, one of the most dangerous stretches of water on Earth. Not because of aliens or Atlantis, because of what the ocean itself is capable of doing. the Atlantic Ocean is not just a natural wonder, it is a graveyard, the largest graveyard in human history. On the floor of the Atlantic Ocean right now, there are over 3,000 shipwrecks from the First and Second World Wars alone. Battleships, submarines, merchant vessels, tankers carrying fuel that never arrived, cargo ships loaded with weapons, food, and supplies that were desperately needed and never reached their destination. And inside many of those wrecks, there are still human remains. The Battle of the Atlantic was the longest continuous military campaign of the Second World War. It began on the very first day of the war, September 3rd, 1939, and did not end until the last day, May 8th, 1945. For almost 6 years, the Atlantic Ocean was a killing field. Germany deployed a weapon that nearly won the war before it started, the U-boat. Submarines so effective, so silent, and so deadly that Winston Churchill later wrote, "The only thing that ever truly frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." German U-boats operated in groups called wolf packs. They would track Allied convoys for days, communicating with each other in code, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. Then, usually at night, they would strike simultaneously from multiple directions. Ships would explode in darkness. Crews had minutes, sometimes seconds, to abandon vessels before they sank. The numbers are staggering. During the Battle of the Atlantic, the Allies lost over 3,500 merchant ships and 175 warships. Germany lost 783 submarines. Over 30,000 Allied merchant sailors were killed. Nearly 28,000 German submariners died, a casualty rate of 75%. 3 out of every 4 men who served on a German U-boat did not survive the war. But the Atlantic was a battlefield long before World War II. During the First World War, Germany introduced unrestricted submarine warfare, attacking any vessel in the Atlantic, regardless of nationality. In May 1915, a German U-boat torpedoed the RMS Lusitania off the coast of Ireland. The ship sank in 18 minutes. 1,198 people died. The outrage helped pull the United States into the war. Today, the wrecks of both world wars lie silently on the Atlantic floor. Some are war graves, protected by international law. Others are slowly being consumed by the ocean, their steel hulls dissolving into the water after decades of saltwater corrosion. The Atlantic Ocean swallowed 2 world wars, and it kept almost everything. The Atlantic Ocean has never needed wars to kill people. It is perfectly capable of doing that on its own. Throughout human history, the Atlantic has produced disasters so catastrophic, so sudden, and so complete that entire ships vanished without sending a single distress signal. Vessels that were considered unsinkable, crews that were considered the most experienced in the world, passengers who had no idea that the voyage they were beginning would be their last. The most famous maritime disaster in history happened on the night of April 14th, 1912. The RMS Titanic, the largest, most luxurious, and supposedly most unsinkable ship ever built, struck an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank in 2 hours and 40 minutes. 1,517 people died. The water temperature was -2 degrees Celsius. Most victims didn't drown. They died of cardiac arrest within minutes of entering the water. But the Titanic, as famous as it is not the deadliest maritime disaster in Atlantic history. Not even close. In 1915, the same year the Lusitania was torpedoed, the HMHS Britannic, the Titanic's sister ship, also sank in the Atlantic. In 1916, the SS Eastland capsized in the Chicago River connected to Lake Michigan, killing 848 people in water just 20 feet deep. But the true scale of Atlantic maritime catastrophe is found not in famous named ships, but in the countless unnamed disasters that history has largely forgotten. Slave ships crossing the Middle Passage, colonial vessels lost in Atlantic storms, fishing fleets swallowed by sudden hurricanes. Historians estimate that between 1500 and 1900, over 1.8 million enslaved Africans died during the Atlantic crossing alone. Their ships are scattered across the Atlantic floor, unmarked, uncelebrated, and largely unfound. The Atlantic also kills through storms. Hurricane-force winds can develop with terrifying speed in the Atlantic basin. In 1780, the Great Hurricane of 1780 killed over 22,000 people across the Caribbean, the deadliest Atlantic hurricane ever recorded. Entire islands were stripped of every tree, every building, and every person. And the ocean floor reflects all of this. Scientists estimate there are over 100,000 shipwrecks on the Atlantic floor, from ancient Phoenician trading vessels to modern container ships, each one a story, each one a disaster, each one swallowed completely by an ocean that has never once stopped to acknowledge what it has taken. The Atlantic does not mourn. It simply continues. Everything we have talked about so far, the wars, the disasters, the geology, has happened in the upper layers of the Atlantic Ocean. The part where sunlight reaches, the part where humans have always sailed and drowned and explored. But below that thin sunlit layer, there is another world entirely. A world that covers more area than all the continents combined. A world where sunlight has never once penetrated. A world where the pressure is so extreme that it would crush a human body instantly. A world that we have explored less than the surface of the moon. The deep Atlantic is not empty. It is alive. More alive than almost anywhere on Earth's surface. Scientists estimate that the deep ocean contains between 700,000 and 1 million species of creatures. We have formally identified fewer than 250,000 of them. That means there are potentially hundreds of thousands of species living in the Atlantic right now that no human has ever seen. The creatures that live in the deep Atlantic have evolved solutions to survival that seem to violate the rules of biology as we understand them. There is no sunlight. So many species create their own light. Bioluminescence is not rare in the deep Atlantic. It is the norm. Scientists estimate that 76% of all deep-sea creatures produce their own light. The anglerfish hangs a glowing lure above its own head to attract prey in the absolute darkness. The vampire squid, despite its name, is not actually a squid at all and survives in the oxygen minimum zone where almost nothing else can breathe. The giant squid grows to 13 meters in length and was considered pure mythology by scientists until a live specimen was first photographed in 2004. But the most unsettling discovery is what lives in the Hadal Zone, the deepest trenches of the Atlantic, below 6,000 meters. Scientists expected these zones to be essentially lifeless. Instead, they found entire ecosystems. Creatures that feed on marine snow, the constant gentle rain of dead organic material drifting down from the surface world above. In 2022, researchers discovered a new species of snailfish living at 8,336 meters depth in the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean. The fish was pale, almost translucent, moving slowly through water under 830 atmospheres of pressure. We share this planet with creatures living under conditions we cannot survive for even 1 second. And most of them we have never seen. The deep Atlantic is not the bottom of the world. It is a separate world entirely. Every civilization that has ever achieved global power has done it through one thing: control of the Atlantic Ocean. This is not a coincidence. It is the most important geopolitical fact in human history, and it explains almost everything about the world we live in today. For thousands of years, the Atlantic was a wall, an impenetrable barrier at the edge of the known world. The ancient Greeks called it the Sea of Atlas, a place so vast and so dangerous that to sail beyond the Strait of Gibraltar was considered an act of madness. The ocean was not a highway. It was a prison wall separating worlds that would never meet. And then, in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west from Spain, and everything changed. The moment Columbus crossed the Atlantic, the wall became a bridge, and the civilization that controlled that bridge controlled the world. Spain was first. Within 50 years of Columbus, the Spanish Empire stretched from the Caribbean to Peru to the Philippines. The Atlantic became a highway, carrying silver and gold from the Americas back to Europe in quantities that had never existed before in human history. Spain became the wealthiest nation on earth almost overnight. Then came the Dutch, then the French, then the British. The British Empire understood something that no previous empire had fully grasped, that controlling the Atlantic Ocean meant controlling global trade. The Royal Navy was not built to fight wars. It was built to control sea lanes, to ensure that British merchant ships could sail anywhere on the Atlantic unmolested, and that no rival ships could do the same. At its peak, the British Empire controlled 35% of global trade, almost all of it moving across the Atlantic. London became the financial capital of the world, not because of anything happening in London itself, but because of what was happening on the Atlantic Ocean. And then, the Atlantic shifted power, one final time. After the Second World War, the United States Navy became the dominant force on the Atlantic Ocean. The same dynamic that had given Spain, then Britain, global power, now gave it to America. Control the Atlantic, control the world. The NATO alliance, the most powerful military alliance in human history, was built around one core purpose: ensuring that no hostile power could ever challenge Western control of the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic did not just shape history. The Atlantic is the reason history unfolded the way it did. Every empire, every war, every trade route, every colony, traced back to one ocean. The Atlantic Ocean has survived asteroid impacts, ice ages, volcanic eruptions that lasted millions of years, and the complete rearrangement of the continents. It has outlasted every civilization that has ever sailed its surface. It has swallowed empires, armies, and the ambitions of every nation that has ever tried to control it. But the Atlantic has never faced anything quite like what it is facing right now. The ocean is changing, faster than at any point in the last 10,000 years. And the changes are so fundamental, so deep, and so interconnected that scientists who study the Atlantic professionally describe what is happening not as a crisis, but as a transformation. The Atlantic is warming. The surface temperature of the ocean has risen by more than 1 degree Celsius over the past century. That sounds small. It is not small. A 1 degree rise in ocean temperature represents an almost incomprehensible amount of additional heat energy distributed across millions of square kilometers of water. It means more powerful hurricanes, more extreme storms, more rapid intensification of weather systems that were already deadly. The Atlantic is also changing chemically. As the ocean absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and the Atlantic absorbs more CO2 than almost any other ocean, the water becomes more acidic. Ocean acidification is dissolving the shells of marine creatures, disrupting the base of the food chain, and threatening ecosystems that took millions of years to develop. But the most potentially catastrophic change involves something called the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. Scientists call it AMOC. You might know part of it as the Gulf Stream. AMOC is essentially the Atlantic's circulatory system, a massive conveyor belt of water that moves warm water from the tropics northward toward Europe and cold water southward along the ocean floor. It is the reason Western Europe has a mild climate, despite being at the same latitude as Canada. It is the reason London is livable while Labrador is frozen. Scientists have now confirmed that AMOC is weakening. It is at its slowest point in over 1,000 years. If it collapses entirely, and some models suggest it could collapse within decades, the consequences would be immediate and severe. Western Europe would cool dramatically. Sea levels on the American East Coast would rise by an additional meter. Weather patterns across the entire Atlantic basin would be completely disrupted. The Atlantic built human civilization, and now human civilization is changing the Atlantic in ways we do not fully understand and cannot fully predict. The ocean that has always been there, constant, powerful, indifferent, is no longer constant. And for the first time in its 180 million year history, one species is responsible.